Hey, hello, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials.
Hey, Engagers! This is fantastic. Today we have Professor Richard Bartle. I'm sure you have heard of him before, but first of all, Richard, Professor Bartle, are you prepared to engage?
I'm always prepared to engage.
So let's do this. Professor Richard Bartle is best known for having co-written in 1978 the first virtual world, MUD, the multi-user dungeon, and also for his 1996 player types, the killers, socializers, achievers, and explorers, which has been it has seen widespread adoption by the MMO industry. In 2003, his book, Designing Virtual Worlds, is a standard text on the subject as well, and he's a very influential writer on all the aspects of MMO design and development. And in 2010, he was also the first recipient of the prestigious GDCOnline Game Legend award. That sounds amazing, Richard. Congratulations for that, even though it was a while ago. I'm sure that sounds pretty interesting.
Yes, I'm more like a game myth now than a legend, but still.
That's true. So, Richard, the first thing I always like to get into with guests is to get an idea of what their life looks like, or what how their experiences get into their life. So, the first question is, what does a regular day with Professor Bartle look like?
Regular day, that's probably one when I'd be teaching at the university, which I didn't do today, so today wasn't a regular day. But if I'm teaching, then what happens is I get up when I get up when the sun breaks through the curtains and wakes me up prematurely.
It's always premature.
Yeah. And if it's not the sun, it's some pigeons or something outside. But anyway, I wake up fairly early because my wife commutes to London, goes off there. Then after a bit, I head off to the university where I work, go into my office, switch on the computer, and see if there's any mail I need to answer. If there is, well, doesn't mean I'll answer it, just see if there is any. Then I'll get my laptop and head off to the lecture theatre, where I shall arrive several minutes early, begin lecturing on time. If I'm lucky, there'll be some students there. Others may show up later on, some may not. Depends on if it's a 9 o'clock lecture, then maybe a fifth of them will be there at the start. Maybe another fifth might arrive as they stagger their way, blinking through into the daylight from whatever they did the day before. That will last a couple of hours. Then I'll probably have meetings with students, individual one-on-one meetings, supervisory meetings, where they come and tell me what they should have done last week but didn't. Or if they're too ashamed to do that, then they will develop some illness and tell me about that. I will read some academic papers, answer some of the emails I should have answered earlier. Then in the afternoon, I might have some more lectures, I might have some meetings, and then I'll come home and play computer games relentlessly until I go to bed.
It sounds like a very, very exciting way to pass your day. I love it.
It's riveting.
Well, the good thing is that now students can't say with your homeworks that the dog ate it, because, the dog doesn't need a computer, right?
Yes, the digital dog ate. No, they just say things like, well, actually they don't, because we've got a submission system that they have to use, which is completely without mercy. So if they don't submit it on time electronically, then they get 0. And Oof. Yeah, like 9 seconds late, 0. They can appeal, but some of them seem to think, well, I've got 8 weeks for this assignment. What are the chances that everybody else will be uploading it 5 minutes to the deadline? Well, pretty high. So there's going to be quite a big rush of uploads there. And if you're not on a fast connection, you may get some lag. And what do you know, 9 seconds late. So we do get people who submit late, even after assignments, projects that last months. They'll still somehow not manage to submit until a few minutes past midday. So I actually quite like this because it means that they can't harass me and say, please give me an extension. And then I look really bad when I say no, because now all I can say is, I'd love to give you one, but sadly, it's not my fault.
I have to say, it was a while ago when I graduated, maybe 10 years ago. I was a computer science engineer. But that thing which you're saying right now, it just like literally brought me right into my studying days. It's like you have this project for like 2 months, and it's only maybe 3 days before when you say, darn, I better get to do this. And you spend 3 straight days up until like 1 hour before delivery. And if you're lucky, you'll have it 1 hour before delivery.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can submit early, so you can submit a draft just in case you get hit by a bus or something. But a lot of students don't even do that. I mean, what are the chances that they're going to submit late?
That sounds fantastic. So, Richard, the first question I would like to know is, and this is a complete spin from what we've been talking about. This is what I'd like to call the story of your favorite failure. Sometime when you were maybe creating a game or something for your class, and that actually, is a big failure. But of course, from failure, and that's something that we all learn from games. Failure is not final or fatal. And there's many things to learn. So I would like to hear that story of a failure that set you up actually maybe for future success or a lot of learning from it.
Well, all my failures have been failures that I have learned from, but not necessarily to my advantage. So I've learned things like I should have taken that job rather than that job. If I had taken that job, I would be sitting here on my yacht answering this from the south of France somewhere, or in the Mediterranean. But I didn't take that job. I took this job, and because I took this job, I'm sitting at home with a pair of headphones on. Now, those tend to be my kind of failures. This guy looks really good. He's smart. He's clever. Let's form a company with him. And he is really good, and he is smart and clever until he goes mad and shoots himself. If only I were joking. I mean, those are the kind of things where you think, okay, well, I shall learn from this in future. It hasn't actually come in useful because I've never formed a business partnership with somebody who had bipolar disease since then. But
maybe because of that, you didn't do it again.
Well, it could have been, yes. But in terms of games. There are some things that I knew I was doing wrong at the time that I did wrong deliberately in order to show that I was right. They were wrong, if that counts.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, when I was developing the game Mud User Dungeon that you mentioned in the introduction, players kept telling me they wanted a particular type of character class that was all to do with killing. But a berserker or something like that, and I knew it wasn't going to work, and it didn't fit my vision of what Mud was like. But I thought, if I put this in, then it'll show people that I do know what I'm doing and that I'm the game designer, not them. So I implemented it faithfully, but everything I put in, I surrounded with in programming terms, basically an if dev in C, but it was before C, so it was another mechanism. So I could take it out at the drop of a hat, and I put it in, and people played with it for a couple of months, and it sank like a lead balloon, and I took it out and said, there you go, C. And so he said, yeah, we were wrong that time, but we have these other ideas.
Well, there's a bunch of other ideas that won't work.
Yeah. So I put them on a list. So I had a list of ideas, and I just kept putting them on the list. And if they said, oh, I've got this great idea, we could have like a dog. Yep, it's on the list. All right. I've got this other great idea for a castle in the air. That's good. I'll put that on the list. And some of the things I put on the list I did actually take off the list because they were good. But others I left on the list, and they're still on the list. They're not coming off the list.
They will remain in the list forever.
Yes. Yes, they will be on the list when I'm long gone.
So that's a very interesting approach. I like the fact that you let the maybe not the game fail, but the idea fail by itself to show other people why it was not a good idea. So I really like that approach. Have you used perhaps that kind of methodology, so to speak, in a classroom?
Well, I usually like to give students enough rope that they can hang themselves. Yes, and then I can,
exactly,
and then I will show. Well, this is how you should have done it. No, I mean, I don't like to humiliate students.
Oh, certainly.
Not much, anyway. So if I do, I warn them. Look, this is going to be embarrassing, but it's only for 5 minutes, and don't worry. And so that'll be all right.
It'll be okay. You'll survive.
Yeah, you'll survive even if I won't. Or I say I'm going to go through embarrassing everybody in the class individually, but it's anonymous, so no one's going to know who I'm embarrassing. I won't know who I'm embarrassing, but you'll know. So I get them to do things like write a review of a session playing a game, and then I just read it out and mock it all the way through. The class love it, and they do learn from it. But when it's your turn, it's a case of, oh dear, what's he going to say about this? So, yeah, I mean, when you implement skills in games, you can have people learn skills either by doing something successfully or by failing. So if you want to learn how to sneak around, then you can either say, well, try and sneak from here to here, and if you succeed, then your sneak level goes up. Or you could have somebody try to sneak from here to here and fail, in which case they get into combat or something, but as a result of the failure, their sneak level goes up. So there's two ways you can do that: by letting them grind. This is I'm going to learn how to poach eggs. I'm going to go out and buy 100 eggs, and I'm going to poach them one after the other until I can poach eggs. That's grinding. You just keep doing it until you're an expert like that. But the other way is I'm going to learn how to poach eggs. I'm just going to try making eggs. And once I've had a few failures, I'll learn from that. I'll be able to make them better. And you probably won't need 100 eggs to do that. But you won't be wanting to eat most of the first ones. So it's that sort of approach you can, and that's how you would implement skills in games, and that's kind of how you can implement skills in real life. It's grinding or learning from failures.
Love it. I absolutely love it. I was thinking that you would go in a similar direction, and that's how I wanted to dig a bit deeper, and that's lovely. I think. And we've mentioned this in the podcast with past guests as well, that failure is something that gets a very bad name, but it's actually very useful for many key learnings in life and in education and in many places. So it's something that I love to talk about.
Yeah, but it's not great if the consequences of failure are too high.
Yeah.
Things like I wonder if I would do my examination better if I did no revision. I'll experiment. No. Don't do that now. Just trust what other people have told you.
Yeah, that's what games are fantastic for, because there you can fail and you can just try again. You can start over, even if you start from the first level over again, like for example, in Mario. You can always try again. There's always another chance. Yeah,
I wish I could have saved my life at some points and then gone back and reloaded it, but still.
That would be a fantastic skill to have in real life.
Yes. Especially if I remembered what I'd forgotten, like, what was the lottery ticket this week? Maybe I'll just go back to the previous sale and save and buy that number. Yeah.
That would be fantastic. But Professor Bartle, I would like to shift now into, instead of going for the failure, actually going for a big challenge that you've faced in when creating games or in your classes, and that you've actually overcome. How would that story look like?
things I've overcome, big challenges I've overcome.
Yeah, for example, in creating a game or in your classes, and had a challenge with your students. You didn't know how to do X, and you said, well, what about if I try Y, and gets you there. I don't know, just any success.
Well, success is...
MUD is a fantastic history of success.
Well, MUD is, yes, but that wasn't just my success. I wrote that with a friend of mine, Roy Trubshaw. He started it, in fact. So that would count as a success, but whether it was a challenge is another matter, because we knew what we wanted to do and then we did it. The challenge was just putting in the effort. Challenges which we didn't, or I didn't know what to do about, and then had to learn or concoct solutions on the spot. And those are few and far between. Mostly those have led to failures rather than successes.
I mean, that's true. But when you started saying that MUD initially, you already knew what to do. But getting to know what you want to do and what you have to do is not an easy task. And maybe when you're already there, and when you got to that level of knowing, I mean, how to get there, it might sound easy for you. But when you're on the other side of the fence, you say, "Wow, that's fantastic!" And
well, yes, but the other side of the fence doesn't know the context. With MUD, okay, this was 1978, back in when dinosaurs roamed the internet. And
they still do in Chrome for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was we didn't even, it wasn't even called the internet; it was ARPANET back then. An Advanced Research Project Agency. That was the closest thing we had. So Roy and I were making a game world. We're basically making a world, a virtual world. We were doing it in text rather than graphics because there weren't graphics. We didn't have graphics. We had teletypes, so printing things out on paper very slowly, slower than we can type. So we were doing it in text, but we wanted to make a world, and the reason we wanted to make a world was because we didn't like this one. With this one here wasn't fit for purpose. It's fit for purpose if you come from the right background, if you've got the right, well, in Britain anyway, I don't know how it is elsewhere, but if you've got the right the house you live in, or the right accent, or you went to the right schools, those kind of things are...
that they determine your life in a very major way, for sure.
Yeah, you've got no say over it. And but Roy and I were lucky that there was something else that we had no say over, and that's that we were both very clever. Now, people can't help a lot of things in life, I can't help what sex I'm born or anything like that. And we didn't like the way that the real world judged you based on things over which you had no control. Things, they weren't looking at your strength of character. They were looking at you and saying, well, you're from the working class background, in my case, East Yorkshire, in Roy's case, Wolverhampton. And when you're an angry young man,
you get many ideas.
Well, you do, but our ideas weren't of the let's seize the means of production. Ours were, this world needs competition. This world is not good. We want to make a world that could be good. And being idealists, being computer scientists, we went off and made one. That was why we did it. So it wasn't so much the challenge, which again we failed because, we failed so far. We won't fail in the future. Virtual worlds will be what we wanted them to be, but they're not going to be what we wanted them to be in our lifetimes, because it's a much more it's much harder to get people to understand what virtual worlds are about once they've played them as games and just see them as games than what they were intended to be, which is places that you can go to and be and become yourself. You still do that in a virtual world, but you don't do it as like how we were.
Yeah, you were intending something different for the virtual world. You were intending people to live there, basically, in a way.
Well, not to live there. I mean,
in a way.
yeah, people to go there, visit them as places, so that when you go there, you can be yourself. When you come out, then yes, you're a father, or you're a sister, or you're someone stuck in a wheelchair, or somebody who has only got one eye, whatever. Whatever life's dealt you in real life, and people teaching you with pity or contempt or disdain or anything else, in a virtual world, it's where your mind can go, and then you can construct yourself, your body around the mind. So that's what we were aiming for, and that's what we attempted to do, and that's what we did. But the people who took it up and took it away in different directions. Some of them were better, some of them were worse, some of them are better from some perspectives, but nobody really seemed to get what we'd done it for. And that's a disappointment. So that's why, yes, it might have been a challenge, but it wasn't. It was a success, but currently a failure. But in the end, it'll be a success.
I'm sure it will. There's many things that are going in that direction, and technology is aiding many things to get to happen with, I'm just naming VR and AR and those things because it's the way they're called right now, but AI and all of these things that I'm sure you know better than I do.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say VR necessarily, because VR brings in too much reality, as in at the moment. In VR, yes, there's a physicality to it, which is in the real world. Things like voice and so on, they aren't mediated, so that if I speak, then you hear my voice. You don't hear my voice mediated through a voice font to sound differently how I want it to sound. So there's a whole bunch of things which are moving in the right direction, but it's ebbing and flowing. But eventually the tide will come in and consume the obstacles and drag them away, and we'll be left with.
It's getting there. It's getting there for sure.
Yeah.
I love it. Richard, when you set out to create maybe a game or something, an experience which might be game-like or a virtual world, or something like what you created in Mud, how do you have any sort of process? Is there a series of steps that you typically take that could be generalized?
If it's a game, then what I need to know is what I want to say to the players. So what is it that what do I want to say to the players through the game? Why am I making this? I'm making it because I want to say something. Game design is an art form. Game designers articulate things through the gameplay of their games. Therefore, if I'm going to make a game, it must be because I want to say something. What is that thing I want to say? Then following that, who's going to play it? It might be that who's going to play it comes first, because I want to make a game for these people. That means I want to say something to it. What is it I want to say? So it can follow that way around. But essentially, if anybody, my advice to anybody who's making a game not for learning purposes, it would be figure out what you want to say and to whom you want to say it. And once you know that, all the decisions you make will just flow from that. They just drop out once you know what it is you're trying to say. In Mud's case, it was about freedom to be yourself. All the decisions we made, they just fell out knowing that. That just makes all the decisions so much easier, because that's what we're trying to say to you. We're trying to say to you, you can, by playing this game, be yourself. Become yourself. Find out who you are. So that applies in so many not just massively multiplayer games, but in almost every game. And sometimes you might think, oh, I've got a great idea for a mechanic. I'll just make a game
around it.
yeah, around it. But in a sense, that's a toy game. It's a game that you're playing with a mechanic. So the mechanic is like any other plaything. It's a toy. You're just playing with it. You're not doing with it for any reason other than just to play with the mechanic, to do something with it.
Yeah, when you start with the mechanic, everything spins around the mechanic and not necessarily around a message, as you were saying before.
Yeah. Now, it could be that if you get a mechanic and you think, oh, this is nice, what could I do with it? The mechanic, if you think about it enough, then you'll think, oh, what's this? What does it allow me to say? What can I do? Is this something about equality, perhaps, or is it something about injustice, or is it something to do with building bridges? It's something like that. What is it quite like? It's connecting, or is it like some kind of a spark between people? If I get close enough, then spark. And then suddenly everything. Once you know what you want to say, even if you started with a mechanic you don't end up using, that could be the catalyst which gives you your game. But you do need to know what you're saying. And so many game designers, professional game designers, don't get to do that. They may want to say things through their game design, but they're pretty well told, your game design, we want the game to look like this, and they spend all their time figuring out how much a sword's going to weigh, or messing about with interface things just to try and get the game to be playable. They don't get to create through their game as much as they perhaps should, and
that's a shame completely.
It is. If somebody is only interested in designing games like as an intellectual exercise, they can be very good at it, but I'd say that they were designers of games rather than game designers. They're not putting any of their soul into it. And that's similar things with gamification. If you're gamifying something, the number one thing you need to know is, for whom am I gamifying it? Because if you don't know who your audience is, how can you create for them?
Exactly. Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. And in that same sense, is there anything that you would say that like maybe a best practice or something that you think any game or any gamification project could benefit from? Like, say, if you do this thing, or if you go through this idea, any project that is intending to do gamification, to have a very clear objective, would benefit from it. Is there something that you would say could be that element, so to speak?
Well, again, this is more of a meta point, but what I would say is make sure you know why you're gamifying it.
Yes.
If you say, why am I am I doing it because, hey, it's a bandwagon? Well, okay, it's a bandwagon. At least you know it's a bandwagon, but then you don't really care what you're doing. You're just following a bandwagon. But if you're saying, look, I need to gamify this because something's not happening. Something is happening that shouldn't be happening. Why is it that I want to do this? Something's not happening fast enough. Some people are understanding, some people aren't. I want to do something. Why aren't they engaged? And if you know why you're doing it, then that helps you do it. And you may come to the conclusion, well, actually, I don't really need to gamify things at all. I just need to switch the order I teach things, or I just need to make it clearer what people are supposed to do, rather than making them jump through hoops and giving them beans as a reward. So, and so that's what I would be advising. Try to understand why you're doing it.
Yeah, and that's very much in line with what we were speaking about previously. That you said you want to know why you're creating a game. What do you want? What's your message? What do you want to say? I think it's very in line with that meta thinking of starting with what is it that you want to do, what is it that you want to achieve, and in the case of gamification, why do you want to have gamification from the start? Yeah,
that's pretty well it. Yeah, I mean, gamification, I would regard as it's a different skill to game design. If you get game designers involved, then they'll be able to come up with ideas for you, but those ideas will be where they're but they'll have things that they want to say through a game, not through gamification, which is pretty well making anything but a game. So you can get some ideas, but the gamification experts are the ones for whom their medium is gamification, not games. And they'll be able to create the kind of bespoke content you want. And I mean, as an analogy, it's like the advertising industry. If you want to advertise something, well, sure, you can just make a little poster that says, "Buy my sheds. My sheds are wonderful." And people will say, "Oh, yeah, there's a sign there, buy my sheds." Okay. But that's an advertisement, but it's not a very good one. If you've got some sheds you want to sell, then you want to be creative about it so that people will notice your advertisement, that it's different. Maybe you make a little jingle about sheds, or some little comedy show about sheds, or you show a shed in a state of disrepair and it's about to collapse, and it's given me so much love over the years, it's done so much for me, but it's time for it to go away. I need a new shed. Where shall I go? Sheds are us, or whatever. I mean, I just made that up on the spot. It doesn't really matter. The thing is that advertising is a creative industry because people get used to adverts. Gamification has to be creative, if anything, because people will, if they just see, points, leaderboards, what do I care?
Again.
Yet again. Oh, wow, yes, another one. Hooray. Once they've seen it a few times, then they'll just shrug their shoulders. So you need to be creative. You need to create bespoke content, and that's where creative gamification would come in, and that's where the people who are in gamification for the long term, rather than the people who are here today, gone tomorrow, onto the next bandwagon.
Quick buck.
Yeah, that's where they will become valuable beyond what they are at the moment, because they will have those skills.
I'm happy to say that in many ways the bandwagon of gamification is pretty much passed as a bandwagon, as a hype. I mean, that has the good thing that exactly what you were saying, the people that are there just to make a quick buck and then get on to the next bandwagon are mostly, I mean, not completely, but mostly are starting to get away from the industry and going into, saying that they're now doing AI and machine learning and VR and AR and all these things that, they're again just jumping into a bandwagon and saying we're doing this.
Yeah, I'm giving a talk on AI and computer games tomorrow in London.
So very much in line.
Yeah.
Make sure the bandwagon's still there.
Well, I've been doing artificial intelligence. That's my PhD's in artificial intelligence. So I've been doing that since the 80s. So about time the bandwagon got to us.
It arrived finally.
Yeah, not for long, but
don't let the Terminator come in. Richard, what would you say is your favorite game? You're talking about your day including games in the afternoons, but maybe your all-time favorite, your current favorite, whatever you want to get into.
All-time favorite game, Dungeons and Dragons.
The RPG.
Yeah.
For sure. I did, to be honest, and this has come up, like, it's probably the third or fourth time it comes up, and I always say the same thing, that I never got to play the RPGs myself, like Dungeons and Dragons, and I did have a couple of friends who were into it, and I never quite got excited about it, and now I'm kind of regretting it. One of those ideas that you said, I took this job and not this other job. I didn't get into the RPGs, and I'm kind of regretting it now, because finding a group to do an RPG when you're married and have a family, etc., it kind of gets a bit harder.
Yeah, finding the time. The thing is that I'm a game designer, so what I like about games isn't necessarily what players like about games. But what I liked about Dungeons and Dragons was that designing was part of the play.
Yeah.
So for me, I did like playing the games. That's quite fun. But it was the world creation that, for me, made Dungeons and Dragons the game that I look back on playing most fondly. But today, I mean, what they're on now, 5th edition or something, and I started on 1st edition, like 1976, and I got a white box with 3 books in it sitting on my shelf right there. And it's things have changed. It's become bigger. It's gone through stages of being bloated. There's stages of trying to pretend to be an MMO. It seems to be coming back on course now, but it's still got far too many rules compared to what it had in the early days, when everything was improvised and the rules were guidelines rather than rules. And but it enabled you to build worlds and to let people visit worlds. And the thing with virtual worlds, the computer ones, people can visit those, many more people, but over a certain amount you start getting cracks where people are visiting not to play, to have fun, but to spoil the game or to exploit the game. Whereas in Dungeons and Dragons, if there's 6 people and one of them's a jerk, well, you just don't play with the jerk again. in a computer game, online game, the jerk can follow you around.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, I've been looking forward to having you on the podcast for a while, but like the final push I got was relatively recently from Andrzej Marchewski, because I have this question where I ask guests who would they like to see or listen to actually in Professor Game. And now I bring this question to you. I know you've met and you've talked a lot with Andrzej Marchewski, but is there anybody that you would like to listen to interviewed in a podcast like Professor Game?
Have you been interviewed?
No, not in this podcast at least.
Well, in that case, perhaps you should get people to interview you.
That's a cool idea. Maybe something in the sort of a Q&A. It could be something very cool.
Yeah, because it's all right you asking other people questions, but it's not fair that you don't get to people asking you questions where you get to give your opinions instead of saying, "Oh, well, yes, that's wonderful. That's hilarious." Yes, you can tell us what you think rather than what you think in response to what other people think. So, go for it. Yeah.
That's definitely the most different answer that I've gotten in this question, and I have to say I love it. Not because it's interviewing me, but because I actually think it's a very interesting way to tackle it. So thank you very much for that. Is there also a book that you would like to recommend to people in this podcast? Especially think that there's many people thinking about games, gamification, how to implement that maybe in their classroom. It could be K-12, higher education, maybe even people who are into training. Is there anything that you would like to recommend to such an audience? Speak about getting to know your players first.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be a book about gamification because I don't have many books on gamification. I mean, hardly any. And there are probably better books than any of the ones I've got. If it were a book, if I wanted something about world building, okay, then I'd just say Lord of the Rings. Which isn't even a textbook.
I'm actually rereading the Silmarillion right now.
Right, okay, the Silmarillion. Yes. But if you want a textbook, then if you want one that's actually straight down the middle, this is a good textbook for learning game design, as opposed to things like game production and so on. Then I would say Jesse Shell's book, Book of Lenses.
Yes,
that's a very good book, and not just because I agree with most of what he says. If you wanted a book which was more about understanding why people play, at least from some angles, and something that was accessible and something that you could give or recommend to students that they might actually read, then I would go with Ralph Costa's A Theory of Fun for Game Design.
That's a fantastic book.
Yeah.
Those are fantastic recommendations. Thank you very much.
Fairly easy to make. If I was at in my office at the university, I would just be reading off the whole
the shelf.
Lines of books. Yeah, Ernest Adams, you've got to read Ernest Adams. I mean, I'd just be going through them all. But for people, it depends on what I want to learn. Gamification, there are better experts than me in gamification who have said better, who know more about the subject than me, whose views I'll happily defer to over my own.
Of course, all of these books would have to join your book in our libraries, the Designing Virtual Worlds, which would be a fantastic addition to anybody who doesn't have it. Like myself, I have to say I haven't read it yet.
Oh, don't worry. It's timeless in the sense that it went out of date within a year of being written. So it doesn't matter if you leave it. You're not going to miss out.
It's on the list, but not in the list that you had for Mud. It's on an actual reading list that gets back to me every once in a while.
I actually go, if I've got a book on my list, I actually buy the book.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I'm looking at a shelf with about 30 books on it, maybe slightly less, maybe 25 books that I really need to read, but I buy them quicker than I can read them.
Yeah, that's I've been trying to I've struggled with exactly what you're saying before, so I try to limit myself the amount of books I have on the physical reading list, the ones that I actually have. It's not working yet. I still have, as you say, like maybe, I don't know, like 10 books, physical books, and maybe 30 on my Kindle waiting for me. I'm currently going again through the Silmarillion, as I said. But it's a struggle. There's so many fantastic things out there to read, for sure. Richard, what would you say is your superpower when creating a game?
Well,
your sweet spot, something where you feel you excel at, where you feel happy when you're doing
it's
exactly that.
Not that I feel it, but others might feel it.
That's fair as well.
Well, the thing is, things like how do you design a game? I don't have to think about that. I just do it because that's how I think. Game design is my medium. So it's like asking someone who's a painter. I don't mean like painting your walls. I mean an artist. How do you paint? I mean, the thing is that they can do it. Yes, it might be lots of skills and they've learned techniques and things through training, but it's something that they can just do. And game design, I mean, I've learned things over the years through game design. Not that I've much of it's been explicit. Most of it's just been absorbed. But I played so many games when I was a kid because my dad's a gamer that when I became an adult, game design was just something I could just do. And so that's it. All these questions about what processes should you follow? Well, I don't know what processes I follow. I just do it. I can invent some for you to say, but really it just comes down to start the ball rolling and then let it roll, and then it's going to roll where it's going. So
it's funny. The other day, in the interview with David Mullick, he said that up until very recently, he said, I didn't know what was my process. I didn't know what I was doing when I was designing games until I read, I think he was talking about Amy Jo Kim and the process that she follows. And he said, well, that's exactly what I do. That makes sense. So now it's my process as well.
I was actually going to mention Amy Jo Kim because she was one of the first persons to write a book on gamification. And I mean, years before it became a thing. And I was thinking, should I mention that? But I couldn't remember the name of her book, so I thought I'd better not. I just remember.
She's actually launching, today is the 30th. Tomorrow is the official launch of her book, Game Thinking. That's more geared towards startups and innovation, but she's launching it tomorrow. So
yeah, I saw the ad on Facebook.
Yeah, for sure. She knows who she's targeting. Yeah, so Richard, is there any final piece of advice you would like to leave with, especially for those people who have never, were not born or did not get that ability like you did from the start, and who have never designed something related to games, gamification, or similar? Is there any advice you would like to give to them?
Well, why are they doing it? Is it that they want to learn it, or to add another string to their bow? There are many things that I can't do, but I don't go off and immediately want to learn how to do them. There are many things that I can do, and I can do them very well, but I loathe doing them, like administration. So if there's somebody who wants to do some gamification and they've got no experience of it, then I guess the thing to do would be to look at some examples, see what it involves, think of something that you might want to try to gamify as an exercise, and then try to gamify it and see if it works for you. If it works for you, then, well, maybe you have got a latent talent which you have now awoken. If it doesn't work for you, well, you can keep plugging at it and maybe suddenly you'll get it. Or you might think, well, you know what, I'm actually much better at writing stories, so instead of trying to gamify this, I'm just going to write some kind of a advertising copy or some kind of novel about it, or anything else, because everyone's got
maybe it's not my thing. Maybe it's not my thing to gamify. It's not necessarily for everybody, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's worth trying, because you might not know. I mean, it might be that I'm the world's best fly fisherman, but I don't know that until I start fly fishing. It might be that I'm amazingly good at, I don't know, playing pool, although it seems unlikely. But for all I know, I might have some kind of ability built in there that I'm unaware of until I try it. So if you think, yeah, gamification, that sounds interesting, or that sounds useful, that sounds something I might want to do, well, dip in, try it. If it works, then carry on, keep on. If it doesn't work, well, at least you didn't spend 3 years getting a degree in gamification only to go off and end up working in a nuclear power station.
I love that, because I mean, the thing is that you're always, and that makes a lot of sense, you're always getting back to why are you doing this. Maybe if the purpose is very high and you're still very convinced, you can, as you said before, you can still grind. Or you can say, well, I'm not going to grind. I'm not willing to do this. The purpose was not that important, and I want to do something else, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine as well.
Yeah. It's the only thing is that if somebody comes along and says, hi, you're working for me, and I want you to do this, and go off and do it, and you really don't want to, and you're not very good at it, and they still make you do it, then that's not so good. Yeah. But other than that,
That's a terrible situation to be in.
Yes,
I don't recommend it to anybody. The doctor won't give it as an official recipe for you. So try to stay away from that, engagers, for sure.
Yes. Happens all the time in academia. I can't tell you how thrilled I am at telling students I've never met that they should have come to my lectures.
Well, Richard, thank you very much. I'm sure there's many more things about you and things we can learn from you that we weren't able to get into in this interview. So is there any way that people can see more of your work, can get maybe in contact with you? Is there anywhere they can go?
Well, I'd be pretty bad on the internet if there was no email address on me, would I? Yeah, I mean, you can Google me quite easily, but my main email address is richard@mud.co.uk, or if you want to be more academic-y, then you can email me at my university address, rabartle@essex.ac.uk. I've got a website which you can find if you look, and then you'll see, this is what websites looked like in 1997 and have never been updated since. But yeah, I mean, that's mud.co.uk.
Fantastic. Thank you once again, Richard. This was a fantastic experience. I'm sure the engagers will get a lot of ideas and inspiration for whatever it is they want to do. And even if what they want to do is not do gamification or not do game design, because that could be a thing as well. And that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense for you, you just maybe try it and maybe then decide not to do it. So that's a very key learning I say you could also take from this episode. And again, thank you very much for all those insights, all that experience that you brought into this podcast. And it's time to say it's game over.
Well, bye-bye. Game over.
Hey, engagers, it's fantastic to have you around. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Professor Richard Bartle. And you have to know, this podcast makes sense because we have you, the engagers. So let's connect on Twitter. That way you can let me know, more questions, new guests that you would like to see in Professor Games, any doubts you have, any struggles that you might be having on your gamification journey. So you can just reach me on my Twitter account going to professorgame.com/Twitter. That will lead you directly into my Twitter account. So let's get the conversation started. I'm always sharing content on gamification and especially around education. Hey, don't click continue yet. Do you want to know who is Gustavo Tondelo from the University of Ontario and what he's been doing to implement gamification into his classes? Then you have to listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.